You, of all people, have seen the consequences of gun violence. Where, if any, should there be a limitation in the Second Amendment?
I'm not going to do anything during my presidency to take people's guns away. I do want to say this, that gun violence, particularly against children, is unacceptable. And we need to end that. One of the things we also ought to be investigating is why this is happening. Because we've always had abundance of guns in this country. In the past 20 years, there's been no per capita increase in the amount of guns we have. And yet these killings, these mass killings, have exploded. And we need to look at at other reasons for that as well, a potential reason. NIH has not studied the etiology or the cause of gun violence since 1996. And NIH needs to be studying them to see if there's connections to some of the SSRI and psychiatric drugs people are taking, whether there's connections to video games. There's other countries that have comparable numbers of guns that we have. For example, Switzerland, which is comparable. It's not as many, but the last mass shooting they had in Switzerland was 21 years ago. We have them every 21 days. Something is happening, and that's not a political statement. That's just an observation that anybody with a brain can make and ask the question, are there other things causing this? When I was a kid, there were gun clubs shooting clubs at our schools where, kids would bring their .22s into school, and nobody ever blinked at that, and nobody was shooting kids. What happened? It's something else happening, and we need to look at that realistically and not just dismiss that as a political ploy. Let's all ask this question together as Americans. Is there something else that explains this?
Well, vaccines are magic. They can save lives.
Everybody thinks, when they hear, okay, you're going to stay locked down until there's a vaccine. And as Bill Gates said, a magical vaccine. They're thinking that, the vaccine's going to do what we've been told vaccines do, which is to give everybody who gets one lifetime immunity and no, major health problems. What are the chances they're actually going to get a vaccine like that? I would say 0. Here's what I predict. I predict you're going to be seeing Bill Gates and Tony Fauci week after week dampening expectations about the vaccine. They were originally saying it's a magical vaccine we're going to give to everybody and everybody is going to be immune. And they're going to say, well, actually only 80% of people will get immune. And then they'll say 70%, and they'll say 50%, and then they'll say 20%. But it's still worth it to have 20%. And they'll try to sell us on that.
All right, breaking news. Pharmaceutical giant Pfizer just announced moments ago that its coronavirus vaccine is 95% effective.
Meg, we should point out that Pfizer shares are up by about 3% on this news. Obviously, more good news there.
91%. 90% efficacy rate.
This is a great vaccine.
Great day for humanity, great day for science, great day for the markets. Check this out, because
it's got to be purchased, manufactured, and then there has to be money there for it to be purchased. And so the world needs to put up more money.
Their vaccine's efficacy against COVID dropped from 96% to 84%.
80% effective after just one dose.
Just a single dose.
A reduction of 75%.
Those lines go down.
Which fell below 50%.
You can't even keep up with this because it's moving so quickly.
42%.
30 to 40%.
Vaccine provides just 33% protection.
We know no vaccine lasts forever, so the protection starts to wane a bit, and that's what the boost is all about.
And then they're going to say, well, the vaccine, it's not actually lifetime immunity. Immunity only lasts for 1 year, 1 season, and actually maybe not even that, maybe only 2 or 3 months, and then you have to get another one.
That may not offer protection sort of for a lifetime, right? It's not a one and done. Booster, so-called third dose, it is confusing to people.
It really is going to be about focusing on getting that shot just once a year. Much simpler, much easier to do.
Don't worry so much about the number of boosters. Worry about when you got your last booster.
Okay.
Is the CEO of Moderna, Stefan Bancel. What a blowout quarter. Congratulations to you.
Oh, yeah, we definitely think it's going to be like a flu shot. COVID is not going away.
Tuesday.
And that's why we're also working on combining flu and COVID, so it's easier.
You are the COVID company then.
The new updated COVID-19 vaccine is the most...
And that's my prediction. No, and I could be wrong, but I would say 0. And all you have to do is look at the flu vaccine.
Well, thank you for illuminating all of this for us today. I want to leave on a positive note, but it's like, wow, we're screwed.
And that's the magic of this thing. But there's no doubt in the next 5 years, we can, we just need to mess around.
The World Health Organization was once a great agency that took care of the poor and underserved communities around the world. But in recent decades, it's been taken over by global elites and foreign powers that don't have America's best interests at heart. This is why we need to stop President Biden from signing the WHO Pandemic Preparedness Treaty. That treaty lays out a blueprint giving the WHO unprecedented authority. Those powers go into effect the moment that the WHO declares a pandemic, which it can do at any moment, even if no true pandemic exists. Even if no true pandemic exists. If this is the first time that you're hearing about this, it's time for you to do some research. The United States of America has a constitution for a reason. We can't let it be stripped from us by international bureaucrats and their bosses at the Billionaires Boys Club in Davos. We the people still have the power. If you want a president who will stop the WHO in its tracks and stand with you, please donate whatever you can to my campaign today. 4% of our GDP went to healthcare when my uncle was president. Today, 20% does. It's $4.3 trillion. Our entire defense budget, including national security, veterans, everything is $1.3 trillion. Healthcare is $4.3 trillion, and 93% of Medicare claims are for chronic disease. 6% of kids had chronic disease when my uncle was president, 60% today. Nobody's saying anything. All these autoimmune diseases, which I never heard of, rheumatoid arthritis, juvenile diabetes, these exotic illnesses like Crohn's disease, lupus. I have a lot of young people in my audience. Almost all of them have something. It's hard to find a young person who does not have one. Neurodevelopmental disorders, ADD, ADHD, speech delay, language delay, tics, Rett syndrome, ASD, autism. Our kids are all on Adderall. They're all on SSRIs. Why? Doctors didn't just start prescribing these for no reason. We have damaged this entire generation. We have poisoned them. And the autism rates have gone from 1 in 10,000 in my generation, 70-year-old men. 1 in 10,000 of people my age has autism. 1 in every 34 kids in my kids' generation. 1 in every 22 boys. The military can't recruit kids anymore. They're so badly damaged. And it's bankrupting our country, and it's rising exponentially, and nobody is mentioning it. And we have a medical cartel, which are regulatory agencies, the pharmaceutical companies, the doctors, hospitals, which are all owned by hedge funds, are now making a killing on chronic disease. And the sicker we get, the richer they get. The insurance industry. The sicker we are, the richer they are. And nobody is saying anything. No, not one presidential candidate ever mentions this. It's the biggest issue. The debate between, Medicaid for all, or whether there's a public option or a gradual integration or Obamacare, whatever it is, it's all about moving deck chairs around in the Titanic because it's shifting costs from one person to another. Is it the doctors who pay the costs? It's going to be the hospitals that pay the costs. It's going to be the HMOs, the pharmaceutical companies, the government. Who's going to pay it? That's the only debate that's going on. And what we should be saying is, how do we reduce the cost? We pay $4.3 trillion for healthcare. That dwarfs what anybody else pays in the world per capita. We're paying 2 or 3 or 4 times what European nations do, and we're getting worse outcomes. When I was a kid, we had the best healthcare system in the world. The care that Americans get when they are sick, if they get any at all, is some of the worst in the world. And we have the highest chronic disease burden on earth. 93% of Medicare costs are chronic disease, and something like 85% of Medicaid. If we can get rid of chronic disease, we can solve our healthcare crisis in this country, which is also the economic crisis. The second biggest cost to America is the military, which, if you include national security and veterans benefits, $1.3 trillion a year. Well, this is $4.3 trillion, more than 3 times what the military costs. It's by far the biggest cost we have. But we want to reduce the budget deficit. We got to start with this. It's highly likely that in the next 20 years, we're going to face some catastrophic crisis in our country. It could be an economic meltdown. It could be a war. It could be environmental injuries, catastrophes, whatever. We're America. We can weather any kind of storm. We have our entrepreneurial impulses. We have the greatest natural resources in the world. We'll figure out a way around it. As long as you're healthy, we can figure it out. But if you got a chronic disease, or if you're caring for a child with full-blown autism, that reduces your productivity to probably 10 or 20% of what it would normally be. The key is to get Americans healthy again so that we can be resilient and that we can cope with these kind of crises. We all need to stay in good shape, and that's important for not just ourselves, our individual lives, our satisfaction, our relationships with our family, but it's also important for our country to reduce the healthcare costs and to make sure that we're there, that we're, in good shape to serve the public and to serve our community. So it's kind of a social obligation to try to keep yourself in shape. I hike every day because I want to be outside, and that gets me centered. Then I spend a half an hour in the gym every day. Well, maybe yoga, it may be swimming, it may be running, whatever it is, but you have to be disciplined about it. And that, discipline is important. It's how we're not here to be building a big pile for ourselves, and whoever dies with the most stuff wins. We're here to build something that's much more enduring than wealth, and that's character. And the way that we build character is by making commitments and then keeping them. You can always find 30 minutes, to do something. So I keep it short deliberately. I go in, I work really hard for 30 minutes, and then I get out. I've been able to do it for most of my adult life. I have 7 kids, and I'm able to generally keep up with them. I'm doing a political trip to Hawaii. My son Finn is going to come with me, and we're going to surf together. I can do that. I can play volleyball with them. Some of my kids like to play tennis, and I can do that. I can stay on a tennis court with them, and I can be active and keep up with them. I want that in my life. I don't want to be sitting on a couch for the rest of my life, with a remote control in my hand, fighting with my family about what to watch. Because I want to watch the History Show and the Nature Show, and they want to watch something else. But being outside and being active, and, for me, it just makes me happy. On January 9th, 2024, Dr. Anthony Fauci admitted during congressional testimony that the 6-foot social distancing mandate, quote, sort of just appeared, end quote.
Dr. Anthony Fauci now admitting social distancing wasn't based on science. Fauci telling a House committee this week the idea, standing 6 feet apart, quote, just sort of appeared. The shocking admission comes nearly 4 years after statements like this.
Every aspect of that ending the COVID outbreak in 30 days has some aspect of it of physical separation. Whether that's avoiding crowds, whether that's staying 6 feet away from people, whether that's doing teleworking, all of it does that.
Dr. Fauci also forced Americans to wear masks after admitting that they don't work.
Right now, people should not be walking. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask. When you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and it might even block a droplet, but it's not providing the perfect protection that people think that it is.
And remember when he said that the COVID vaccine would stop you from getting infected?
The situation is so clear, the data affirm. If you get vaccinated, you are protected, even with the Delta variant.
And while voices of dissent were silenced, a Republican president and a Democratic president and their political parties and their members of Congress made the same choice to hand the keys of our nation over to Dr. Fauci. Then they stood by and watched as he destroyed our schools, our churches, our businesses, and our economy. Under their watch, we ended up having the highest death rate from COVID in the world. Throughout the pandemic, I was posting scientific evidence and warning that Dr. Fauci was wrong about many of these issues. And to silence that criticism, government officials and their allies in the media branded me as a conspiracy theorist and deplatformed me and heavily censored me both in the mainstream and social media.
This week, some of the biggest names in the anti-vax movement descended on D.C. for a rally to protest vaccine mandates.
And now Dr. Fauci is finally admitting that the Wuhan lab leak is not, after all, a conspiracy theory.
The most likely origin is a jumping of species. I still do think it is, at the same time as I'm keeping an open mind that it might be a lab leak.
Of course, I already knew this because I literally wrote the book on this incident. So the next time that the going gets rough, who do you want to have the power? We the people or the two political parties that got almost everything wrong? It's time to forge a new path together. If you want to see that happen, please donate to my campaign. Our filing deadline is February 29th. Whether it's $1 or $5 or $100. Every dollar you donate will allow America to break free of the shackles of the two-party system. I want to give you back your country. I want to give you back the power of self-governance and restore our nation as the world's exemplary democracy. I want to restore our moral authority across the globe. Join me and declare your independence. I've probably brought more lawsuits against EPA than any other attorney. When I sued Monsanto, we came across discovery documents that showed that it was an email exchange between the executive officers of Monsanto Corporation with the head of the pesticide division of the EPA for over a decade. A very well-known man named Jess Rowland. He was really secretly working for Monsanto, and they were telling him in these emails, you have to kill this study, you have to falsify this science. We went into court with about 2,400, mainly home gardeners, who had gotten non-Hodgkin's lymphoma from using Roundup. And in the first case, we won $289 million from the jury. The second case, we won $89 million. In the first two cases, the judge would not allow us to show that letter, that email exchange to the jury. But in the third case, the judge allowed us to do it. And we asked the jury for $1 billion, and they came back with $2.2 billion. And that forced Monsanto finally to come to the table. Hey everybody, I'm here at the First Baptist Food Kitchen in Queens, New York to help out and to get a first-hand look at hunger in America. This is only one of 750 soup kitchens and food pantries in New York City. About a quarter of the adults and 600,000 children in New York struggle with hunger. Most of these families aren't even unemployed. But their financial plight is so desperate that even a single unexpected bill can send them spiraling into ruin. I'm grateful to my friend RFK for his long commitment to the First Baptist Food Pantry And to the many volunteers that I met here, and to the church staff and donors who are helping to meet a tiny bit of this desperate need. The number of hungry people who have come here looking for food over the past 2 years has doubled. And most of those are people who came across the border. When I become president, I promise you that I'll make hungry Americans my priority. We're going to restore the prosperity of this country for everyone. If you want to see that happen, please donate to my campaign. Our filing deadline is February 29th. So let's show them that hunger is an issue that we all care about and that we can do something about.
How much did your political evolution shift because of the COVID craziness?
I am open to everything now. I'm open to things that I never thought I would have been open to. And I really think that the door fully came open. My first interview with RFK Jr. He was so reasonable and so smart and so many interesting ideas and enlightened me to this cozy relationship between the regulators and the pharma companies, which I really wasn't aware of. I mean, I can't let a pharma company representative into my office to give me a pen with a drug name on it, and yet those guys are living together and cross-pollinating jobs. I mean, that's mind-boggling to me. Yeah. So, and that he had a very sensible, didn't necessarily fully agree with it, but a sensible idea about vaccine research that he would like to push forward. Not that vaccines are bad. His family's all vaccinated. My family's all vaccinated. And at the end of that interview, he said something to me. I've met him now many times since then. He goes, "Oh my goodness, Drew, you are so courageous to talk to me." And I thought, it blew me back in my chair. I thought, I need courage to have a conversation with an adult in a public setting. And he was right. This is a time where I didn't realize how much speech was being suppressed, how much was being manipulated, how much. Then what happened after that was the Twitter files, and I started seeing what's going on. And it's just been to me this is all reprehensible. And what has happened as a result, I don't think I've shifted my political views. I've just really I never imagined I'd be in this point in my life at this age and place in my career. Freedom and freedom fighting and the courage to stand up for it have been the most important thing in my life right now. And that's crazy.
The key reasons that I ran for president are to end this chronic disease epidemic and to restore Americans to good health.
The FDA Commissioner, Robert Califf, has said our life expectancy is going the wrong way. You were quoted in the Washington Post where he said, if we had regulatory agencies that were interested in actually looking at data, we would be trying to figure out why all-cause mortality for Americans has increased. They're not COVID deaths. As president, how would you begin to really address this problem?
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to NIH during my first week in office, and I'm going to assemble all the division chairs and the branch chairs. And I'm going to say to them, we're going to do something different. We are going to fund studies that are going to tell us what's causing this epidemic. I'm also going to call in all the scientific journals into the Justice Department. And I'm going to say to them, you are representing yourself as a neutral and reliable source of health information. And you have done tremendous damage to public health because you are publishing fake science to promote the mercantile ambitions of the pharmaceutical industry and of the food industry, of the big agricultural interests, of the oil and gas and coal and all these other big, powerful industries. And you're lying to the public and you've caused tremendous damage to public health. And I'm going to hold you responsible. I'm going to litigate against you under the racketeering laws, under the general tort laws. I'm going to find a way to sue you unless you come up with a plan right now to show how you're going to start publishing real science and stop retracting the real science. It will give the attorneys a chance to litigate these issues in court because there's no good science on these issues. You can't sue a company for making your children fat, for poisoning them so that their microbiome doesn't work anymore. Once you create that science, once you have 15 or 20 studies that show that, then those kind of suits become possible. And that's how you really change policy, just like we did with Monsanto case. We got a critical threshold of studies, and animal studies, observational studies, epidemiological studies, bench studies that showed that glyphosate was causing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in Roundup. And before that, if you were the president of the United States and you tried to ban Roundup, you would go nowhere. It doesn't matter who you are. But If you have enough science to get past the Dalbert threshold where the judge has to make an independent judgment that there's sufficient science, I'm going to provide that enough science, sufficient science on each one of these exposures and each one of these injuries to show who's causing what and hold them responsible in court.